I looked at him and I thought, you have to forgive him. You have to let this go for his sake. I didn't want him to go to his grave without him being released from that. And knowing that I had forgiven him. And I mean, we all sin. Yeah. And his sins were no greater than my sins as far as God sees.
Hi, Val.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Navigating Life Podcast. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself, please?
I'm a mother of 4, 6. I have 2 stepsons as well. 11 grandchildren, born in Lubbock, Texas. Lived in Mississippi from 5th grade till the time I graduated high school, and then back to Texas after I graduated. Been married 20 years, and I'm an interior designer.
Awesome. I know you've been through some horrific childhood experience. Would you, I know it's hard, but can you share a little bit about that journey with us, please?
Okay. It started, back then you just don't really realize when it starts, but it was 5th grade or 6th grade is when it started. My dad molested me for a couple of years when we lived in Mississippi.
Okay. I'm sorry. First of all, I'm sorry that it happened to you. So you were probably a preteen at that time?
Yes.
So how did you process that?
I mean, it was like, the first time it happened, I was like, what just happened? Yeah. It was just like, who is that? Yeah. And it just, I had no way of processing it. I didn't tell my mother, didn't tell anybody. It was just, what? And it happened repeatedly and repeatedly, and it was crazy that I just never had it in me to not tell anyone. Yeah.
It's hard because you're scared, first of all, and you feel awkward, right? And the other thing is, parents are supposed to protect. And when you see that's not happening, how do you react? And also, this was, I believe, at the time when were people talking more about therapy, counseling, or anything like that when you were growing up?
No, never heard anything like that in my life. No.
Yeah, so that wasn't even an option for you to say, okay, I'm hurt emotionally, mentally, I need help.
Right.
And you couldn't even say any of that.
No.
So a couple of years of that, and but I know from your story you didn't tell someone until you were almost 40. And so can you take us there a little bit?
Well, I'll go back. It ended one day. I just had the courage to say no when he came into my bedroom one day. And I said no. And it never happened again after that. So that was huge for me. And I don't know why it happened. I don't know. I'm sure it was God working, but yeah, that was how it ended. And then I never told anybody until I married Willie, and I was 40 years old.
Yeah. Val, take us to an incident or a time, in your life that this trauma, this abuse affected you to where you couldn't, it's not normal in your life.
Well, I was extremely promiscuous as a child or teenager. And then when I married Willie, it was very difficult sometimes intimacy. And he's a very, very affectionate man, which I'm so grateful for. But I have a hard time being that way. I am to my grandchildren and my children, but to Willie, sometimes it's hard for me to show affection. And we had to go to counseling several times to get past that. And we both grown through the counseling that we had. And we learned things, how to navigate that, and tools to use to navigate that.
So, what would you say to someone that is maybe in a similar situation as you were as a child or as a preteen? What would you say to them?
I would say have the courage to find someone that you trust and tell them, a neighbor, your mother, um, your best friend if you're a teenager, a pastor, someone at the church, if you're involved in church, just find someone you trust and tell them. And also find the courage to say no to your abuser.
How did your healing journey begin?
Well, it's started by telling. And that was the first, it was like this release had come over me. And I went to counseling after I had told Willie about it. It was just something that I just knew I needed. I journaled a great deal from advice from my counselor. And that was so helpful, and it's still helpful to this day for everyday things. And the counseling helped tremendous amount. Telling my mother was a huge part. Telling my children, and I only told my youngest son and my daughter just recently. I mean, over the past, it's been 2 years. So to me, that's recently. My two older sons had known before. But just not keeping a secret, and I think my dad, was always protected because no one ever knew. And finally, I was protecting myself by finally telling and getting the secret out there. And I was always worried about what my children would think, because he was a wonderful, wonderful grandpa. He was a terrible dad, but a wonderful grandpa. And he told me when my first son was born that he would never do anything to disappoint my children. And I knew that was his way of telling me, I'll never hurt your children. And he never did. He was wonderful. So I told myself years ago when Taylor was born that I would never tell anybody. I would go to my grave with it because I didn't want my children to be hurt. Yeah. But over the years, God obviously, it was his timing, and it was time to tell. So I told, and there was no protection for anyone, but there was healing for me during that time.
It's hard, right? But that's what keeps us in isolation, because it's hard, it's yuck, you don't want to get through it, but there's healing on the other side, and you have to go through that process of, even though it's difficult, even though it's hard, but like you said, it's you're protecting yourself, and that's where I feel like the healing journey begins. You've talked about forgiveness and a great deal, and knowing you personally. So I know forgiveness played a big part in your healing. Would you like to talk about that a little bit, please?
For the longest time, I wasn't even thinking of forgiveness because there was, the process, you go through so many stages of feelings and emotions, and, I was so angry for so long. And then I just got to the point where I looked at him, and I think for the most part, it was after my children knew. And he was so devastated that they knew. And I know that was so hard for him. And it's crazy that I cry about that part of this journey, but I do. It's just, I feel sorry for him because he's so broken. He's never known freedom. And I looked at him and I thought, you have to forgive him. You have to let this go for his sake. I didn't want him to go to his grave without him being released from that. And knowing that I had forgiven him. And I mean, we all sin. Yeah. And his sins were no greater than my sins as far as God sees. So I had to offer them. I had to offer him forgiveness and grace because I'm offered that constantly every day. And for my healing, I had to give that up. I had to give the anger up and forgive and let it go.
Yeah, that is a difficult part too. We know, forgiveness brings healing. Also, unforgiveness kind of binds us, chains us. We know all that up here, but to really put it in action, I feel like it is hard. I feel also that having that community, that support system, that you're able to talk to, share, discipled, I feel like that helps on that journey toward forgiveness. So I know you had a good support system, right? Can you talk about that support system?
Well,
what did it look like?
Willie was major in that. Really close friends who I finally told were huge support. And the one thing that was so beautiful is no one turned against my dad, which I was so grateful for, because he was not that person anymore, once it stopped. He was a changed human being. My children's lives changed him. They were not only a blessing to me, but they were a blessing to him, and it just changed his life. Counseling was major, absolutely major. The tools that they give you to navigate the emotions through it all, because I still have triggers, but I know how to handle them now, especially through prayer. Back then, my prayer life was not what it is now.
So what would you like to say to that, that person right now that's going through, situation like this, that's hurting, that has all these negative emotions? What is one piece of advice or pieces of advice that you would like to share?
Biggest thing is, if you're going through it right now, you've got to have the courage to say no and to tell someone. That's those two things right there. Courage to say no, get out of the situation, and find somebody you trust to tell. That's huge.
Yeah, get help. I mean,
you have to.
Get help, absolutely. And don't feel like you'll be looked down upon because the shame, right? I feel like shame is really big. Did you feel?
Oh, I felt so dirty. Yeah. Just dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the promiscuity came from all of that. And never feeling good enough, never feeling pretty, body image issues, things like that just destroy a life, a child's life. And the repercussions of it are tremendous. So many issues come up, with being abused. And to this day, I still have body image issues, and I'm 61 years old. So,
You look great.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. But it's not as bad as it used to be. Yeah.
I mean, just looking back and saying, okay, teenage self, can you really do all this?
Right.
You don't have you're not equipped to and that's the whole point of a family, right? The family is supposed to be there for you, support you, guide you, model this life, be an example. You're looking up to your older brother or your siblings or your mom or dad. And when that's destroyed, you kind of, relationships kind of get, in your head, you're like, how do we do this? This traumatic experience kind of shaped you um, negatively, right? Some of the things, the negative aspects of this trauma, um, which is one of the things that you have mentioned already, is body image issues. Can you talk a little bit? As a teenager, we already have those.
Yeah.
Because formative years, we're trying to figure out body changing and all that. And on top of that, you've added trauma to it. And so talk about that body image issues going on.
Always comparing myself to my friends. Always. And they were always much thinner than I was, and, had prettier clothes and prettier hair. And, it was always, and, in my eyes. So probably not in someone else's eyes, but in my eyes. And I'm sure they were struggling with the same thing. We just never talked about it. And, for years I've struggled with it. The weight gain, the weight loss, the weight gain, the weight loss, and it does a number on your body. And being 61 now, there's really a number being done. But yeah, and Willie can tell me over and over and over, and he does. And he truly does not miss a day that he does not tell me I'm beautiful, which is wonderful. Now, I have to get to the point where I believe that, and I think with age, with counseling, with help, you get to the point where you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, I'm not ugly. I'm not a fat cow. I am beautiful, not comparing yourself to other women. And I can't say that I don't, but I still do, but not to the extent that I did.
Yeah. All of us have this negative, we all have self-talk, right? And like, what is the talk dominant? Is it negative? Is it positive? And when you go through some difficult, like stormy situations in life, your mind gets affected. And do you remember, back then, did you have any dark thoughts, negative? I'm sure you had negative thoughts, but when you were going through this, I'm sure your soul was crying for it to stop. But, like, how do you remember how that negative talk?
Oh, it's crazy, but I mean, when those things would happen, I would lay on the floor in my bedroom and I would listen to Elton John over and over and over. I have every single one of his albums, and to this day, listening to him, and I don't know why it was Elton John, but it was just this release, and it just, I don't know, I just felt free and not, not bothered by anything. But yeah, it was like I would sit in the dark and just listen to him for hours.
So that was kind of your way of processing the...
Yes, because I never had suicidal thoughts. It never got that bad. Yeah, it was just the torment of not being good enough and not being pretty enough.
Insecurities. Yeah. Do you have any self-care practices?
Well, I work out, and I've worked out since I was 30 years old. So that's been huge for me, is going to the gym, working out, reading. I love to read, doing Bible studies. If I'm about finished with the Bible study, I have to find another one. So I'll go and research and just have another one ready for when I'm finished with that Bible study. But being in God's Word is huge. Journaling, major.
Yeah. Do you have a life motto?
We have to be able to tell our stories, because if we don't, if you die and you've never told your story, then someone out there needs to hear it, and you've wasted it, and God doesn't allow these things to happen for them to go to waste.
Yes.
So my motto is tell, don't keep any secrets. There's freedom in telling your story. You're free.
Yes.
It's like weights have been lifted off your shoulders.
Stories are powerful. There can be so much good that has come out of the ugly, the bad, the beauty that comes from the ashes, right? And absolutely, that is our goal from this podcast, is to show the beauty, the hope. Yes, we're sharing the challenging phase of from each of their journeys, and I really appreciate that. I don't take it lightly. I'm sitting here, I'm interviewing, I'm listening to your story, but they're powerful. I want you to know that they're powerful. And if you're listening, thank you watching. Thank you for listening and watching and being part of this journey. And please share it with a friend that needs this story, that needs this encouragement and advice for them to thrive in life and not just get through life. What life lessons have you learned from your journey?
Be honest, be open, find really good friends. I know that when you're a teenager, they come and go. But I still keep in touch with a friend of mine that I grew up with in Mississippi, and she knows everything about me. That's so important, to find good friendships, people you can trust, and just, and don't keep anything as far as secrets from your husband. Just tell.
Yeah.
Be open, be honest.
Share your story.
Yeah,
share your story. Yeah. Because it can impact and empower someone else. When we say, okay, share, be honest, be open, and normalize conversations. These need to happen. And I feel like more of these, when they're open, and people that are going through will not feel alone, that they're lonely. And because when you're going through that, our mind is beautiful, powerful, but in those places, when in those dark times, you feel like you're the only one that's going through it. And I hope, my desire is that people that are listening, that are going through stuff, will hear and say, okay, I'm not the only one. There are other people going through it, and there is hope. Just hang in there one more day, right? Because we're all definitely going through stuff. How do we have that open, that honest conversations so that our kids can look up and say, well, you know what? They may not understand right now, but they may grow up and say, well, you know what? That is definitely something that I learned from my mom. That she shared her story. She was not ashamed of sharing the yucky part, and she was open, and that will empower them to share their story. And not just to share your story, but there is, you're empowering people through your journey. So definitely, I hope that comes across from our podcast, from our interview, from our guests, all the episodes that we have on the channel. If you've stumbled across, we would appreciate it if you can subscribe to our channel, click the bell notification, watch all the episodes, all the shorts that we have. Be encouraged. The best is yet to come. If you're going through a difficult time, I want you to know that best is yet to come. Good days are ahead of you. And so hang in there, and you are not alone. And thank you so much for this community that we have on YouTube, for being loyal viewers, listeners. We appreciate it. We'll see you in our next episode. Bye-bye.